Today, we're going to talk about the current state of the economy and its potential effects on everyday people like you and I. There's a mixed picture of the economy with both positive and negative developments that could impact you. On one hand, there are signs of improving supply chain conditions and other factors. This could lead to more stable prices, new job opportunities, and boost economic growth. It's a hopeful sign that the economy is moving in a more positive direction. However, on the other hand, there are some challenges that could affect people, like rising car debt, energy prices, and a cooling labor market. That's what we'll talk about here in this video. These challenges could put a significant strain on household budgets, making it harder for people to manage their finances effectively. And that's why I give you the information that you need to know, starting with this video right here. It's important to stay informed about these developments to plan accordingly and manage your finances. This could involve looking for ways to save on energy costs, upskilling for new job opportunities, or being mindful of spending to prepare for any potential economic challenge. Overall, it's a mixed bag of news when it comes to the economy, but it's important to remember that people have the power to adapt and overcome any challenges that come their way. We've been through a lot of the cycles, 1929, the 70s, and the difficulties since the financial crisis. Some people are able to do better than before. We hopefully will be part of those statistics, not the others. By staying informed and being proactive, managing our finances, we can weather any economic ups and downs that come our way. Now, I've got some really big news, and I wanted to begin with the biggest right up front. The largest US grid supplier warns of an energy shortage due to undeliverable mandates. Now, I read this, I provided an actual summary. There's a lot to it, there's a lot of charts in here, but just give me a minute to work through, because we're talking about the potential for blackouts and brownouts, and not having power leads to chaos, leads to civil unrest that we would normally see in developing nations. So let's break this down. The largest US grid supplier, PJM Interconnect, is warning of an energy shortage due to undeliverable mandates. These mandates are driving the closure of coal-fired power plants, leaving the grid vulnerable to energy shortages. And I know everybody has their opinion on coal, but I think it's important to understand that the first and foremost aspect is that people's lives are comfortable, that they have their energy, their housing, and their food. These three things. Everything else is a luxury. But today, we're seeing some very unfortunate events that are taking place. PJM is also facing a backlog of 1,200 solar projects that have been put on hold for 2 years due to a new approval process. This pause could contribute to the energy shortage that they're warning about. According to the transition report, there are several trends contributing to the potential energy shortage. Electricity demands increasing, we know that. Coal-fired plants are being retired. New renewable energy sources are not being constructed fast enough to replace them. So they're saying, we're going to bankrupt coal. And then at the same time, they're saying, well, we don't have a backup. So what does that mean to prices? Well, of course, for you, you're going to pay higher prices, much higher prices. PJM's interconnection queue is composed primarily of intermittent and limited duration resources, which may not be sufficient to meet energy demands. And what does that mean? Periods of time you're not going to have power, potentially, depending on where you are. What does that mean to you? Well, you're going to start to see your neighbors growing a little bit upset. You're going to have businesses that can't operate at all hours. Upset customers. People stop going. You know what? The power's always out. When I went there last time to go grab lunch, power was out. Manufacturing, they can't do it. You see what happens? So that manufacturing gets pushed overseas even more. The analysis basically breaks it down and just shows us that we have way too much power demand, whether it's coming from data centers, whether it's coming from other factors, and this is putting too much pressure, prices are rising. As the nation's largest competitive market for electricity, PJM's warnings about the energy shortage due to undeliverable mandates and resource retirements are cause for concern. We have to look at this and have to see where it goes. It's not just California, for instance, that's experiencing this type of problem. We are noticing it all over the place. Look at diesel on the East Coast was experiencing such a big problem. What seems like just a few months ago, time flies. So it could be any type of energy, but what that means to you is that you have to be prepared. And that's why I talk about right here, talking about the pillars of prosperity. That's one of the two pillars. And I'm going to do a whole video just breaking down the pillars of prosperity. I always reference it, and I think everybody knows what it is. But basically, it's income, increasing your income, as well as number two being self-sufficiency and preparedness, okay? But I'll break that down and give more examples of that. Look at this next aspect here, okay? The pain might not be over for Southern California gas customers as millions recover from exorbitant energy utility bills. The state is considering California gas companies' request to raise monthly rates by 13.2% this next year for the 5.9 million households and businesses that it serves. I mean, yes, the increase comes. It comes at a time every so often, just like every other company. How often do the prices go down? You rarely ever see that. But it's coming at a time when the prices are already so high and people just can't make ends meet. And so that, of course, has an impact on the job situation. Hang on, just wait a second. Okay, you're worried about the blackouts and the brownouts, you're concerned about all this, but understand that this has broad economic impacts. So we're going to talk about that. What about SNAP? Enhanced SNAP benefits for millions of Americans are gone. Well, we're going to have to realize that this is going to really create more civil unrest. I mean, I don't know how to say it any other way. 41 million Americans rely on SNAP. They're relying on food stamps. And, you're basically getting less money out of that. Now, do some people abuse the system? Of course they do. But for a lot of people, they need it to subsist. So that's why we saw the surge in the food banks. That's why we saw all types of different borrowing methods increase. And right now today, we have never seen so much debt. This is the most ever. And it's not because people think it's fun. Hey, let's get into debt. No, I'm sure that's not what the majority think, but this is what happens when you run into these circumstances. And then we're talking about auto loans. I brought this up in a previous video, just wanted to highlight it here again, another point from it, because it shows us when you increase interest rates, what happens. We'll talk about that in the takeaways in just a minute. The buildup in negative equity or the amount of debt exceeds a vehicle's value is rattling consumers and raising alarms within the industry. Though it's not unusual for drivers to carry negative equity, some dealers say that more people are arriving at their lots up to $10,000 underwater or upside down on their trade-ins. Wow, 10 grand on a vehicle? You immediately have lost value. You're trading in. Like for instance, one person, they show you in this article, they needed a new vehicle. They needed a new type of vehicle. They had some, they had another kid or something. The older one wouldn't have fit. They needed this new vehicle. And now suddenly what's going on? They can't afford it. These are the problems. Negative equity is an issue not just in real estate, but also in auto loans as well, okay? Look here, this is talking about student loans. College students are increasingly turning to crowdfunding to help cover their education expenses. This is GoFundMe. It's become so expensive. The debt is so bad in all types of debt, including, of course, student debt, and you've got to crowdfund it? Has nobody considered the possibility? Like everyone's saying, why doesn't the government loan up more money? Why doesn't the government give us tax breaks and all these things? How about asking the question, why is it so expensive in the first place? Why is there so much inflation in healthcare, in tuition, in textbooks, in all of these other aspects? No. Let's blame 2020. Let's blame the lockdowns. Those are a part of it. Let's blame this and that. Let's point over there. Let's point to that political party. Why are we focusing on the fact that they printed $20 trillion globally in a matter of 2 years? And we're supposed to ignore that? Well, some do. Some, really, they do. Next aspect that is really key is where we'll break it down, the takeaways for you. And if we stay away from the takeaways, we're not going to get the details that we need to know. And that's why we're talking about, in this case, real estate. US home prices are forecast to decline modestly this year and by less than previously thought, as demand has declined only slightly, despite expectations that interest rates have further to rise. People are in this mode that they have to get in now, and they are willing to take on more debt. They are willing to do a lot of fraud on the paperwork. We know this. It's not what it was back in 2005, but we are here in basically the same situation today where there is fraud in paperwork. We've seen it before. And all I wanted to highlight was when you increase interest rates, the key takeaway for this, you increase interest rates, you directly impact people and businesses' ability to borrow. Governments can borrow forever, but that comes at a cost. But people, the way that they do this, they use, first of all, their home equity. They start pulling that out. That presents a problem. You've got variable mortgage rates, which increase the level that people have to pay every month. That's another issue. Car loans on top of that become more expensive. And as these things increase, people can buy less stuff. If people buy less stuff, you've got anywhere between 60 and 70% of the economy is literally just the US consumer. That's it. So what happens if they can't buy stuff? Well, then the businesses that all these things come from start to hurt. That has an impact. They start laying people off. And that's where we are at. We're kind of like just at the beginning of that. If they cut interest rates dramatically, like 2023, they say, okay, we're cutting interest rates. Okay, we don't want to cause a recession. We're going to cut it. Different story. But that's not happening right now. Okay? This is just showing us the PMIs. When we look at the PMIs, this is one indication of what's happening with manufacturing, and that has moved down considerably from where we were at that peak in 2021. It has come down a bit. Now, just in the last month, it slightly moved up, but the trend is down. It is in a contraction. So I'm just giving you an update on that as well. This is just talking about Neil Kashkari. Neil Kashkari, the Fed president, said he was open-minded about doing a 25 basis point or 50 basis point rate hike. I would continue to push up my policy path. And, he said originally he was like in that 5 to 5.25, now pushing it up into the 5.4 region. That would be something that the market doesn't think about right now. No, it's thinking 5% right now. And then they're going to cut immediately. That I think is nonsense. So if the market, and the reason I tell you this is, if the market believes 5% is the top and we get 5.25, markets won't like that. If we get 5.4, 5.5, let's say, then the markets won't like that even more. And that will cause this basically pressure downward on stocks. That will impact the markets overall, but there's going to be stronger stocks than others. Which are the stocks that are better? Well, it's generally the consumer staples that will do well. It's, the Pelotons of the world and, all these other companies, the Zooms and so on, that probably won't do so well. The consumer staples, the things that people would buy anyway. And you look at those companies, whether it's, staples that you have in your home provided by Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, all the sort of the Warren Buffett typical type names are some of those. So that's what I want to show you in that. I have so much, but I think we're running out of time, because when you look at what happens, for a lot of people, they are unwilling to see the US dollar as like anything but an anchor. I mean, just look, it's so important. There's no question about it, but other currencies out there are going to affect the US dollar, and the US dollar is going to affect these other currencies. A stronger dollar tends to tighten global financial conditions while diminishing appetite for risk-taking and weakening global trade, as according to the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements. The tailwind behind foreign currencies from a more dovish Fed is generally off the table. Watch what happens as a result of a stronger dollar, because then the market reacts negatively to that. It's generally the way it goes. Very important stuff. Okay, and China, even though I saw it in the comments, there was a comment made about this, what's going on with China? I was told by a certain somebody that China is looking extremely weak right now. Well, there are many things. I've brought up many things about China, but I wanted to show you this, that they're pumping the cash in. They are loaning out like almost historic levels of cash into the system to push it up. And we know about stimulus. We know about quantitative easing and all different stimulus programs that are provided, that it does the job. It weakens you long term, but it does the job. Here, US manufacturing has actually contracted. However, China's PMIs expand. So they're kind of like a 180-degree difference in some ways. China's factory sector grew in February at the fastest pace in more than a decade in a boost for global economy recovery hopes. So if China's doing well, what does that mean? They need, people are asking for stuff domestically, sure, but also around the world. What that stuff is, of course, we don't have that granularity in this article, but that's what it tells us, that over this period of time, we can see that China had locked down for so long, and now they're kind of reopening to full tilt, and that data is going to come out and see, is it really coming at the perfect time? Because all the other countries maybe are weakening, slowing down, and China is basically lighting a fire by using their stimulus, by using their methods of quantitative easing, and trying to take advantage of this moment. So that's really what this is. We're looking at the job situation, we're looking at blackouts and brownouts, but why? Why? All connected to what's happening with borrowing costs. These companies rely on debt, and if they don't get it, they are in a world of hurt, and that's what we're seeing right now. If you want to know more takeaways, if you want to know more information, you've got to watch these videos. I bring them out each and every day. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, because I'm going to bring you the latest and greatest every day. Take care.